The doorbell rang at 9:30 on a Saturday morning, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped straight through the floor. There stood my mother, Sharon, father Robert, brother Tyler, and his pregnant wife Jessica, all clutching suitcases, like they belonged here. Before I could say a word, Mom pushed past me into my living room, her eyes scanning my granite countertops and hardwood floors with calculating precision. "This place is perfect for Tyler's growing family," she announced, as if I wasn't even there. "He needs stability for the baby." Tyler smirked already, walking through my space like he owned it. 3 years earlier, I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I was wrong. Grandmother Helen's funeral had been beautiful in that devastating way that only final goodbyes can be. The entire town of Millfield showed up to honor the woman who had run Patterson's Flowers for 42 years, who had raised me when my parents decided they were too busy building Tyler's football career to notice their daughter existed. Helen had been my anchor, my teacher, my safe harbor in every storm. When other kids spent summers at camps, I spent mine learning flower arrangements in her shop, understanding which roses paired with baby's breath, how to make budget bouquets look like expensive masterpieces. She taught me about business, about treating customers like family, about saving money, and building dreams one petal at a time. "Everything will be yours someday, sweetheart," she would whisper while we arranged wedding centerpieces together. "The shop, the rental house on Maple Street, all of it. You understand this business like it's in your blood." I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? I had been her shadow for 15 years, working every weekend and summer break, learning every supplier's name, every customer's preference. When she got sick during my senior year of college, I deferred graduate school to become her full-time caregiver, driving her to chemotherapy appointments, managing the shop when treatments left her too weak to stand. The will reading took place in Attorney Morrison's oak-paneled office on Main Street. I sat between my parents, Tyler, across from us with Jessica, all of us wearing appropriate mourning clothes and solemn expressions. Morrison cleared his throat and began reading Helen's final wishes in that formal legal language that makes everything sound distant and cold. Then came the words that shattered my world. "I leave the entirety of my business assets, including Patterson's Flowers and the rental property at 423 Maple Street, to my grandson, Tyler Patterson Johnson, trusting that he will use these resources to build a stable foundation for his future family." The room spun. Tyler's triumphant grin burned into my memory as Jessica squeezed his hand in celebration. My parents nodded approvingly, as if this outcome had always been expected, always been right. "There must be some mistake," I managed to whisper, but Morrison shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, Brianne. This will was revised 6 months ago with proper witnesses and legal procedures." 6 months ago, when Helen was barely conscious from her treatments, when she trusted everyone around her to have her best interests at heart. When my parents had been visiting her daily, something they hadn't done since I was in elementary school. After we left the lawyer's office, I confronted them in the parking lot, my voice cracking with disbelief. How could she change her mind? She promised me for years that I would inherit the business. I gave up everything to take care of her. Dad adjusted his tie with practiced indifference. Helen came to realize that Tyler needs financial security now that he's starting a family. "You're young, you can build your own life. Tyler has responsibilities." "I have responsibilities too," I protested. "I sacrificed graduate school for her. I learned that business inside and out. Tyler has never even set foot in the flower shop." Mom's expression hardened into that familiar look of disappointment she reserved specifically for me. "Tyler never asked for handouts, Brianne. He worked construction all through high school while you played with flowers. Helen understood that boys need inheritance to establish themselves properly. The cruelty of it knocked the breath from my lungs. Playing with flowers. As if the countless hours I'd spent learning her business, caring for her during the worst months of her life, meant nothing more than a child's game. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Look, sis, maybe this is exactly what you need. Maybe now you'll learn to stand on your own feet instead of expecting handouts from elderly relatives." Within a month, Tyler sold Patterson's Flowers to a development company that turned it into a strip mall. He used the money for a brand new Mustang and an elaborate wedding in Cancun. The rental property became an investment he managed from his couch, raising rents on the elderly tenants Helen had cared for like family. I watched everything Helen built disappear like morning mist, transformed into Tyler's toys and status symbols. Every time I drove past where her beautiful shop used to stand, where the hand-painted sign, reading Patterson's Flowers, family-owned since 1981, had welcomed customers, I saw a concrete wall advertising cell phone accessories and fast casual dining. But the worst part wasn't losing the inheritance. The worst part was understanding with crystal clarity that my parents had orchestrated the whole thing. They had spent months convincing a sick, trusting woman that her granddaughter was too emotional, too impractical, too female to handle a real business. They had poisoned her against me with calculated precision, then stood in that parking lot acting like justice had been served. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment that I could barely afford on my part-time teacher's aide salary, surrounded by the few mementos Helen had given me over the years that weren't valuable enough for Tyler to claim. A ceramic flower frog she'd used for arrangements, a recipe book with her handwriting in the margins, a photo of us together at the shop's 25th anniversary celebration. I cried until no tears were left, then sat in the darkness understanding something fundamental about my family that I had been too naive to see before. They had never seen me as Tyler's equal. I had always been the consolation prize, the backup plan, the disposable daughter whose dreams mattered less than her brother's comfort. What I didn't know yet was that losing Helen's inheritance was only the beginning of their betrayal. 6 months after Helen's funeral, when I thought I had reached the bottom of despair, life decided to show me that rock bottom has a basement. It started with a pink slip on a Tuesday morning. Riverside Elementary School was cutting their art program due to budget constraints, and as the newest hire, I lost my position, teaching children how to express themselves through color and creativity. The irony wasn't lost on me that Helen's granddaughter, who had learned to see beauty in everything, was being told there wasn't enough money to teach beauty to others. The same week I lost my job, Dr. Martinez delivered news that made unemployment seem like a minor inconvenience. The exhaustion I'd been fighting for months, the weight gain, despite eating less the hair that had started falling out in clumps, it all pointed to a thyroid condition that required immediate treatment and ongoing medication. The good news is it's completely manageable with proper care. Dr. Martinez explained, scribbling prescription information on his pad. The challenging news is that without insurance, your monthly medication costs will run about $320, plus regular blood work to monitor your levels. I sat in his office calculating numbers that didn't add up. My savings account, already depleted from the months I'd spent caring for Helen instead of working full-time, held exactly $1,043. My final teaching paycheck would cover 1 month's rent and groceries. The severance package from the school district amounted to 2 weeks of substitute teacher pay. $320 monthly for medication. Rent at $750. Utilities, groceries, gas insurance. The mathematics of survival looked impossible from every angle. That evening, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. Maybe they would let me stay in their guest room just long enough to get back on my feet, to find another job, and figure out a payment plan for my medical treatment. Maybe family loyalty meant something when your daughter was facing homelessness and a health crisis simultaneously. Dad answered on the third ring, his voice, carrying that distracted tone he used when he didn't want to be bothered. "Brianne, what's wrong now?" "Dad, I lost my job at the school and I've been diagnosed with a thyroid condition that requires expensive medication. I was wondering if I could stay with you and Mom temporarily just until I find another position. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 at the most." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then he sighed the way people do when they're being asked to solve someone else's poor planning. "Brianne, Tyler, and Jessica need the guest room for wedding planning. They're designing their reception layout, and Jessica's dress fittings require privacy. This is an important time for them." The guest room. The space that had been my childhood bedroom until they converted it when I left for college, erasing my presence like I had never existed at all. I could sleep on the living room couch. I offered, hating how desperate I sounded. I wouldn't be in their way. I'd be out looking for work every day. Mom picked up the extension phone with a click. "Brianne, honey, you're 28 years old. Most women your age have established careers and their own homes by now. We can't keep enabling your dependence on family support." Enabling my dependence. As if caring for their dying mother-in-law while working part-time and attending college had been some kind of character flaw. "Tyler never asked us for anything." Mom continued, her voice warming when she mentioned her golden child. "He's always been self-sufficient, responsible, forward-thinking about his future." I wanted to scream. Tyler had lived in their basement until age 25. They had paid his car insurance until he got married. They were currently funding his elaborate wedding while I sat here begging for a place to sleep on their couch. I gave up graduate school to take care of Helen. I reminded them, my voice barely steady. I spent 2 years as her caregiver instead of building my career. I thought that was what family did for each other. "That was your choice, sweetheart," Mom replied with practiced patience. "We told you she was manipulating you with guilt, playing on your emotions to get free nursing care. You chose to sacrifice your opportunities for her convenience." The words hit like physical blows. Helen manipulating me. Helen, who had taught me everything about love and loyalty and finding beauty in difficult circumstances. Helen, who had held my hand through every childhood disappointment and celebrated every small victory like it was monumental. "Besides," Dad added, "you're a healthy young woman with a college education. Plenty of people manage thyroid conditions while supporting themselves. This is just temporary adversity that will make you stronger in the long run." They hung up after promising to pray for my situation and suggesting I contact social services if things got really desperate. I sat holding the dead phone, understanding with brutal clarity that I was completely alone. Over the next 3 weeks, I sold everything Helen had given me that held any monetary value. Her pearl earrings went to a pawn shop for $60. A silver bracelet brought $42. The antique perfume bottles she'd collected sold at a consignment store for $18 total. Each transaction felt like selling pieces of my soul, but I needed those medications. I needed to stay healthy enough to work to rebuild, to survive long enough to figure out what came next. When the money from selling Helen's gifts ran out, I started sleeping in my car behind the 24-hour pharmacy where I couldn't afford to fill my prescriptions. The irony was devastating. Sitting in the parking lot of the place that held the medicine I needed, too broke to buy it, too proud to beg the pharmacist for charity care. My car became my entire world. A 10-year-old Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner and a back seat that didn't quite fold flat enough for comfortable sleeping. I kept my interview clothes hung on the door handle, pressing them against the windows each morning to smooth out wrinkles. I used the pharmacy's public restroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, buying a pack of gum as an excuse for being there so frequently. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort or the constant fear of being discovered. The worst part was the isolation. The understanding that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had weighed my worth against their convenience and found me lacking. But even sleeping in my car, even rationing my thyroid medication to every other day, instead of daily, even applying for jobs, while pretending I had a stable address, I still believed this was temporary. I still thought that if I just worked hard enough, if I just stayed positive and persistent, things would get better. I had no idea that Tyler was about to make sure they got much, much worse. Living in Helen's old pickup truck behind Murphy's laundromat became my new reality, and I had almost convinced myself that things couldn't get any worse. The truck's bench seat was more forgiving than my car's cramped interior, and the laundromat's 24-hour fluorescent glow provided both security and enough light to fill out job applications during the endless sleepless nights. I had established a routine that felt almost sustainable. Wake up at 4:30 in the morning, use the laundromat's bathroom to make myself presentable, then drive to Sunrise Diner for my 5 to 11 waitressing shift. The manager, Carlos, paid me under the table and let me eat one meal per shift, which meant I could stretch my food budget to almost nothing. After the diner, I'd walk dogs for families in the Riverside Heights neighborhood, earning cash for each golden retriever and Labrador that needed midday exercise, while their owners worked office jobs. Evenings belonged to my third job, stocking shelves at Megamart from 7 to midnight. 3 jobs should have been enough to rent a small apartment, even to afford my medications properly. I was earning nearly $1,500 a month, living on almost nothing, saving every possible penny toward a security deposit and first month's rent. In just 6 more weeks, I would have enough for a studio apartment across town and could start rebuilding something that resembled a normal life. Then Tyler decided to remind me that my family's cruelty had no bottom. It started with confused looks from my dog-walking clients. Mrs. Henderson, whose aging spaniel Duke needed gentle twice-daily walks, greeted me at her door with uncharacteristic coldness. "Brianne, I'm sorry, but we won't be needing your services anymore," she said, avoiding eye contact. "We've decided to handle Duke's walks ourselves." The same day, Mr. Kowalski called to cancel his golden retriever, Max's afternoon walks. "Family situation?" he mumbled when I asked if everything was okay. "Nothing personal." By the end of the week, I had lost 4 of my 6 regular dog-walking clients. The remaining 2, elderly Mrs. Chen and busy single mom Angela, seemed nervous around me but hadn't canceled yet. I couldn't understand what had changed. I was the same reliable, gentle dog walker I'd always been. The answer came the following Tuesday when Carlos pulled me aside during my diner shift, his expression troubled and apologetic. "Brianne, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you struggling with drug addiction?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What, Carlos? No, absolutely not. Why would you ask me that?" He shifted uncomfortably, wiping his hands on his apron. "Someone called yesterday claiming to be your brother. Said you'd been stealing from family members to support a habit that you're homeless because you spent your inheritance money on drugs. He seemed really concerned about you, wanted to warn me that you might take money from the register during a breakdown." My knees went weak. Tyler. Tyler had called my employer, poisoning them against me with carefully crafted lies designed to destroy my reputation and my livelihood. "Carlos, none of that is true," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't do drugs. I've never stolen anything in my life. My brother, he's not trying to help me. He's trying to hurt me." Carlos studied my face for a long moment. He had seen me work every morning shift for 2 months, had watched me treat every customer with kindness, had never seen me anything other than reliable and honest. "I believe you," he said finally. "But Brienne, if someone's calling my business with stories like that, they might be calling other places too. You should know what you're dealing with." That afternoon, while walking Mrs. Chen's elderly terrier, I worked up the courage to ask her directly if anyone had contacted her about me. She stopped walking and turned to face me with sad, concerned eyes. "A young man called 3 days ago. Said he was your brother, that you'd been struggling with mental health issues and drug problems since your grandmother died. He said you might become unpredictable or aggressive, that several family members were worried about you being around vulnerable people like elderly folks and pets." The systematic nature of Tyler's sabotage took my breath away. He hadn't just made one spiteful phone call. He had researched my life, figured out where I worked, identified my clients, and crafted specific lies designed to destroy each source of income. "Mrs. Chen, I promise you none of that is true. I would never hurt you or Pepper. You've seen how gentle I am with her." She patted my arm gently. "I know, dear. I've been watching you with Pepper for months. You're nothing like the person that young man described. But I'm 83 years old, and my daughter heard about the phone call. She's insisted I stop having strangers in the house, even ones I trust." That evening at Megamart, my manager, Jennifer, pulled me into her office before my shift started. "Brienne, we need to discuss your employment status here." My heart sank. "What's wrong?" "I received a call today from someone claiming to be your brother. He said you'd been fired from previous jobs for theft, that your family was worried you might steal merchandise or money during some kind of emotional breakdown related to drug use." Jennifer crossed her arms, studying my reaction. "He specifically mentioned that you'd stolen valuable items from your grandmother before she died. The lie about stealing from Helen was the cruelest cut of all. Helen, who had trusted me with her business, her home, her final months of life. Helen, who had given me those few precious mementos before Tyler claimed everything else. Jennifer, I've worked here for 6 weeks without any problems. Have you ever seen me behave unprofessionally or suspiciously?" "No," she admitted. "You're one of our most reliable night shift workers, but corporate policy requires me to investigate any reports of potential theft risk. I'm going to have to let you go." I walked out of Megamart knowing that Tyler had successfully destroyed my income from 3 different sources in less than a week. He had called my employers, my clients, anyone who trusted me with responsibility, and planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't disprove. But Tyler wasn't finished. 2 nights later, I returned to my parking spot behind the laundromat to find my truck's front tire slashed a piece of notebook paper tucked under the windshield wiper. In Tyler's familiar handwriting, "Stop embarrassing our family name. Move somewhere nobody knows us." I sat in the disabled truck during a thunderstorm. Rainwater dripping through a rust hole in the roof onto my lap, finally understanding the full scope of my family's betrayal. They weren't just neglectful or selfish. They were actively, maliciously working to ensure I failed to drive me so far down that I could never climb back up to challenge their narrative about who deserved what in life. Tyler wasn't content with inheriting Helen's business. He needed me to disappear completely to become a cautionary tale about what happened to family members who didn't know their place. My homelessness wasn't just a consequence of their abandonment, it was their goal. As I sat there in the dark, soaked and exhausted, and more alone than I had ever imagined possible, something shifted inside me. I stopped crying. I stopped hoping they would change. I stopped trying to prove to them that I was worthy of their love. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to stop trying to win them back and start focusing entirely on my own survival. Not for their approval, not to show them they were wrong, but because I deserved a life beyond their cruelty. I just had to figure out how to build one from the ashes of everything they had destroyed. The morning after Tyler slashed my tire, I walked the 3 miles to Sunrise Diner with a new determination burning in my chest. Carlos had kept me on despite Tyler's phone call, and I wasn't going to let my brother destroy the one job I had left. During the Tuesday breakfast rush, while refilling coffee for the regular customers who knew my name and appreciated my service, I found myself absently sketching on napkins during the brief lulls between orders. It was a habit Helen had taught me. Drawing flower arrangements when my hands needed something to do, letting creativity flow even in the most unlikely moments. That particular morning, I was sketching centerpiece ideas for an imaginary fall wedding, combining autumn leaves with unexpected elements like wheat stalks and small pumpkins. The drawing showed how budget-friendly materials could create elegant arrangements if you understood color balance and visual flow. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, a distinguished woman in her 70s who came in every Tuesday for coffee and whole wheat toast, noticed my napkin art while I refilled her cup. "My goodness, did you draw this?" she asked, picking up the napkin with careful fingers. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I know I should be working, not doodling." "Don't apologize, dear. This is lovely. Do you have formal training in floral design?" Something about her genuine interest opened a door I thought had been permanently closed. My grandmother owned Patterson's Flowers. I grew up learning from her, but the business was sold after she passed away. Dorothy's eyes lit with recognition. "Helen Patterson was your grandmother. That woman had the most exquisite taste in town. I hired her for my daughter's wedding 15 years ago, and people still talk about those arrangements. I felt the familiar ache of missing Helen, but also a warm pride in being connected to her legacy. She taught me everything she knew. I was supposed to inherit the shop, but..." I trailed off, not wanting to burden a customer with family drama. "But inheritance doesn't always go as planned," Dorothy finished gently. "I run Patterson Wedding Planning. No relation to your family, just coincidence. I've been looking for someone who understands both floral design and budget constraints. Most florists quote my clients prices that make them faint. Would you be interested in designing centerpieces for a small wedding this weekend?" The offer felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in deep water. "Mrs. Patterson, I don't have a flower shop anymore, or professional equipment, or..." "Call me Dorothy, please. I have contacts with wholesale suppliers, and we can work around equipment limitations. This couple has a tiny budget, but wants something beautiful. If you can create something stunning for $200 total, I'll pay you $50 for your design work and time." That weekend, I created magic. Working in Dorothy's garage with basic tools and flowers from the wholesale market, I designed 8 centerpieces that transformed the community center into an elegant reception space. I used Helen's techniques, mums and sunflowers as focal points, accented with branches I gathered from the park, arranged in mason jars wrapped with burlap and lace. The total cost for flowers was $173, leaving $27 under budget. The bride cried when she saw the tables. The groom's mother asked for my business card. 3 guests approached me during the reception, asking about their own upcoming events. Dorothy watched the reactions with a knowing smile. "Brianne, how would you feel about making this a regular arrangement? I have clients every month who need beautiful flowers on tight budgets." Within 3 months, word had spread through Dorothy's network of wedding clients, church committees, and social organizations. I was designing flowers for retirement parties, anniversary celebrations, baby showers, and graduation dinners. Dorothy provided workspace in her spare room and connected me with suppliers. I provided creativity and Helen's time-tested techniques for making inexpensive materials look luxurious. My family had always mocked my art degree as a useless fantasy career and a waste of time. They couldn't understand why anyone would study something so impractical, so disconnected from real earning potential. But those very skills they had dismissed were becoming my salvation. By the end of my first year working with Dorothy, I had saved enough money to rent a small studio apartment and buy a used van for transporting flowers and supplies. I named my business Wildflower Designs and specialized in eco-friendly, budget-conscious events that looked like they cost 3 times their actual price. My big break came when Dorothy recommended me for the mayor's daughter's wedding. The family wanted elegant arrangements that reflected their status, but also wanted to support local small businesses. I proposed a design using locally sourced flowers and sustainable materials, creating arrangements that were photographed for the society pages and shared across social media. The publicity transformed my small operation into a thriving business. Brides started requesting that artist who did the mayor's daughter's wedding. Event planners began calling me first when clients needed beautiful flowers on realistic budgets. I hired 3 employees, women who, like me, had faced setbacks and needed opportunities to rebuild their lives. Within 18 months of sleeping in a truck behind a laundromat, I had enough money saved to buy a house. Not rent, buy. I wanted something that nobody could take away from me, something that belonged to me completely and permanently. I chose a modest 3-bedroom home in my old neighborhood just 4 blocks from where Helen's flower shop used to stand. I paid cash to avoid credit issues from my homeless period and to eliminate any monthly payment that someone could use to threaten my stability. The day I got the keys to my house, I sat in the empty living room and cried tears of gratitude that felt nothing like the tears of despair I had shed 2 years earlier. These were tears of accomplishment, of healing, of understanding that I had built something real and valuable with my own hands and Helen's wisdom. I never told my family about my success. I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, and created a life where their opinions and approval meant nothing. For the first time since Helen's death, I felt truly free. The flower shop location where I had learned everything important about beauty and business had become a coffee house called Daily Grind. I approached the owners and offered to supply all their floral arrangements, small bouquets for tables, seasonal displays for their front window, special arrangements for holidays and events. Every week, I brought fresh flowers to the space where Helen had taught me that creativity could be both practical and beautiful. It felt like continuing her legacy in a way that honored her memory while building my own future. I was finally completely happily independent of the family that had tried so hard to destroy me, which is exactly when they decided they wanted back into my life. For 2 peaceful years, I lived in my house without a single contact from my family. I had assumed they had written me off as a permanent failure, someone whose struggles validated their narrative about responsibility and worthiness. I thought my disappearance from their lives was as permanent as their abandonment of mine. I was wrong. The chain of discovery that brought them back into my world started with a casual conversation between Dorothy and a grocery store clerk who happened to be my mother. Dorothy had been shopping at Morrison's Market picking up flowers for a last-minute centerpiece request when she mentioned to the checkout clerk that she was working late because the wedding lady who used to live in this neighborhood is booked solid through Christmas. The clerk, who Dorothy didn't realize was Sharon, perked up with sudden interest. Wedding lady, what's her name? Brienne something. Dorothy replied absently, focused on her receipt. Sweet girl who grew up around here. Her grandmother used to run that flower shop that became a coffee place. Brianne's built quite a business designing for weddings and events. Just bought herself a beautiful house on Elm Street with cash. Sharon's expression shifted from polite customer service to laser-focused attention. Brianne Patterson Johnson, blonde hair, about 5'6". Yes, that's her. Do you know her? She's my daughter, Sharon said with a smile that Dorothy later described as predatory. We've been so worried about her. She disappeared a few years ago after some family difficulties. We had no idea she was doing so well. That evening, Sharon called an emergency family meeting. Robert Tyler and Jessica gathered in their living room while Sharon shared her discovery with the excitement of someone who had just found a winning lottery ticket. Brianne owns a house, she announced without preamble. Bought it with cash. Has some kind of wedding business that's apparently very successful. Tyler's reaction was immediate and revealing. That's impossible. She was living in a truck behind a laundromat. I made sure she couldn't get decent work anywhere in town. Well, your sabotage obviously didn't work, Robert said grimly. While we've been struggling to keep this family afloat, she's been building wealth in secret. The family's financial situation had deteriorated dramatically over the 2 years since I'd disappeared. Tyler's gambling addiction, which they had hidden from Jessica until recently, had cost them the house Helen's inheritance had helped him buy. He owed $47,000 to various creditors and bookies' debts that had forced them to move into his parents' basement. Jessica was 7 months pregnant with their first child, dealing with complications that required bed rest and expensive medical monitoring. Her maternity leave would be unpaid, and Tyler's construction work had slowed due to a back injury he'd sustained trying to avoid paying a gambling debt. Robert and Sharon had depleted their retirement savings, covering Tyler's debts and Jessica's medical bills. They were facing the possibility of losing their own house to foreclosure, a humiliation that would destroy their standing in the community they'd lived in for 35 years. Brianne owes us for raising her, Robert declared with the certainty of someone who had convinced himself that his selfishness was actually justice. Time she paid back what this family invested in her upbringing. They spent the next week researching my new life with the thoroughness of private investigators. Tyler drove past my house multiple times, taking photos and researching property values online. Jessica, despite being on bed rest, spent hours searching for information about wildflower designs, finding my business website, social media presence, and client testimonials. The picture that emerged from their investigation both impressed and enraged them. I had built something real and valuable, something that reflected well on the Patterson family name they claimed I had embarrassed. My business website featured photos of elegant wedding arrangements, glowing reviews from satisfied clients, and a professional headshot that showed a confident, successful woman they barely recognized. She's been playing the victim while building an empire, Jessica said bitterly, scrolling through photos of a $50,000 wedding I had designed, making us feel guilty for cutting her off when she obviously didn't need our help. Sharon began crafting their approach with calculated precision. They would play the reconciliation card first, claim they had missed me, that they realized their mistakes, that families should stick together during difficult times. If guilt and manipulation worked, they could establish themselves in my house as temporary guests, then gradually make themselves permanent residents. Tyler researched adverse possession laws and squatters' rights, convinced he could find a legal way to claim partial ownership of my property if he could establish residency there. If she lets us stay for 30 days, we might have legal grounds to remain, he told the others with the confidence of someone whose understanding of law came entirely from internet searches. The house is perfect for raising children, Jessica added, studying photos Tyler had taken of my front yard and neighborhood. Safe neighborhood, good schools, enough space for a growing family. Much better than this basement. They practiced their emotional appeals like actors rehearsing for an audition. Sharon would lead with maternal regret and concern for my isolation. Robert would emphasize family loyalty and forgiveness. Tyler and Jessica would play the struggling young couple card, highlighting Jessica's pregnancy and their financial hardship. What they didn't know was that I had been expecting them. Not consciously, but somewhere deep in my instincts, I had been preparing for this moment since the day I bought my house. I had learned too much about their character to believe they would leave me alone forever if they discovered I had something worth taking. I had installed security cameras around my property. I had built relationships with my neighbors, people who knew me as the kind, reliable woman who brought them flowers and helped with their gardens. I had documented every cruel thing they had done to me during my lowest moments, keeping emails, text messages, and witness statements in a file I hoped I would never need. Most importantly, I had built a life so solid and independent that their approval or disapproval could no longer touch the core of who I was. When they rang my doorbell that Saturday morning, suitcases in hand and fake smiles on their faces, I was ready for them in ways they couldn't imagine. The little girl who had once begged them for love and acceptance was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned to recognize manipulative theater when she saw it, who understood that some people view kindness as weakness and success as theft. They thought they were coming to collect what they believed was rightfully theirs. They had no idea they were about to face someone who had survived their worst cruelty and emerged stronger, smarter, and completely unwilling to be victimized again. After that moment at my front door, when I realized my family had come to claim my house, everything moved with the terrible inevitability of a landslide. "We've missed you so much, sweetheart," Mom said, pushing past me into my living room like she owned the place. "We realized what a terrible mistake we made cutting you out of our lives during a difficult time." Dad followed her in his eyes, immediately cataloging my furniture, my hardwood floors, my granite kitchen counters visible through the archway. "This is a lovely home, Brienne. Much too large for one person, though. Seems lonely." Tyler and Jessica brought up the rear, Jessica's pregnant belly, making her movement careful and deliberate. Tyler was already examining my entertainment center, my flat-screen TV, the built-in bookshelves I had filled with art books and business guides. "The living room layout is perfect," Jessica announced as if she were an interior designer consulting on renovations. "We could put the baby's playpen right here by the window, and Tyler's gaming setup would fit perfectly in that corner." I stood in my own entryway, watching them take inventory of my life with the casual entitlement of people who had never doubted their right to whatever they wanted. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We're here to reconcile," Sharon said, settling onto my couch like she planned to stay. "Family is family, Brienne. We know you've been struggling alone and we want to help." "Help," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call abandoning me when I was homeless and sick?" Tyler's mask slipped first. "Look, we all made mistakes back then. But you obviously figured things out just fine without us. This place must have cost you, what, $300,000, maybe more." He was walking through my living room, touching my things, claiming space with his body language. "How I afforded my house isn't your concern," I said. "Of course it is," Robert interjected, his voice taking on that familiar paternal tone he used when establishing his authority. "We're your family, Brienne. Your success reflects on all of us. We have a right to understand how you've built this lifestyle." Jessica was measuring my windows with her hands, clearly planning curtain arrangements in her mind. "This house has such good bones for raising children. The backyard is perfect for a swing set, and the master bedroom could easily fit a crib. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Why are you talking about my house like you're planning to live here? Well, Sharon said with practiced casualness, Tyler and Jessica are facing some temporary financial difficulties. Jessica's pregnancy has been complicated, requiring expensive bed rest and medical monitoring. They're staying in our basement right now, but that's no environment for bringing home a newborn baby. The basement floods when it rains, Jessica added plaintively, one hand on her belly. I worry about mold affecting the baby's lungs. Tyler stepped closer to me, his expression shifting from fake friendliness to barely concealed aggression. Here's the thing, sis. We know you've done well for yourself and we're proud of that. But family takes care of family. You have more space than you need and we're facing a crisis. So you thought you'd just move in without asking? We're not moving in, Robert said, with the false reasonableness of someone who was absolutely planning to move in. We're just asking for temporary help while Tyler gets back on his feet and Jessica recovers from childbirth. How temporary? I asked, though I already knew the answer. 6 months, maybe a year, Sharon said, as if this were a perfectly reasonable request. Just until the baby is walking and Tyler can find stable work. I looked around my living room, seeing my family clearly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. They weren't here for reconciliation or forgiveness. They weren't here because they missed me or regretted their treatment of me during my darkest moments. They were here because I had something they wanted, and they had decided it belonged to them. No, I said simply. Tyler's face darkened. No. Just like that. Your brother's wife is pregnant and potentially homeless, and you're going to say no. Tyler has been employed for 6 years, I replied calmly. You've had plenty of time to save money and establish stability. Your financial problems aren't my responsibility. Our financial problems are partially your fault, Jessica said suddenly, her voice sharp with accusation. Tyler had to spend thousands of dollars dealing with the damage you caused to our family's reputation when you were homeless. People in town were asking questions, making judgments about how we raised you. The lie was so audacious it took my breath away. Damage I caused. Living in a truck behind a laundromat, Robert said grimly. Having our neighbors see a family member in that condition. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for us? You're right, I said, my voice gaining strength. It must have been terrible for you watching me struggle without lifting a finger to help. Mom's expression hardened. We offered to help Brianne. We gave you advice about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and becoming independent. Sometimes tough love is the kindest thing a parent can do. Tough love, I repeated. Is that what you call Tyler calling my employers and telling them I was a drug addict and a thief? Tyler didn't even look ashamed. I was protecting our family name. You were making all of us look bad. And now that I'm successful, you want to claim credit for that success. We want to be part of your life again, Sharon said, but her eyes were calculating, measuring my resistance. Surely you can understand that families should share resources during difficult times. I excused myself to the bathroom, my heart pounding, with the realization that this confrontation was about to get much worse. They weren't going to leave voluntarily. They had come here with a plan, and they intended to see it through regardless of my wishes. I pulled out my phone and called Dorothy, typing quickly while it rang. Dorothy, I need help. My family is at my house trying to force me to let them move in. Can you come over as a witness? I'm afraid this is going to escalate. I'll be right there, honey. Do you need me to call the police? Not yet, but maybe soon. When I returned to the living room, the atmosphere had shifted into something more openly hostile. Tyler was holding my laptop, examining the screen where my business financial records were displayed. Very impressive profit margins, he said without looking up. Wedding planning pays better than I thought. Put that down. That's private business information. Relax, sis. We're family. No secrets between family. Jessica was in my kitchen, opening cabinet doors and examining my appliances. The refrigerator is the perfect size for a growing family. Much better than that tiny thing in your parents' basement. Get out of my kitchen, I said, my voice rising. Or what Tyler challenged, setting down my laptop, but not stepping away from my workspace. You'll call the police on your own family. Tell them we're trespassing while visiting our sister C. Robert moved to stand beside Tyler, a united front of male authority, in my own home. Brianne, let's discuss this like adults. You have significant resources, and we're facing a genuine crisis. The right thing to do is obvious. The right thing, I said slowly, is for you to leave my house immediately. We're not leaving, Tyler said flatly. Jessica is 7 months pregnant and exhausted. She needs to rest somewhere safe and comfortable. We're staying tonight at minimum. The doorbell rang and I nearly cried with relief. Dorothy had arrived, and my family's true nature was about to be exposed to someone who knew me as a kind, successful, trustworthy person, rather than the family disappointment they had spent years convincing themselves I was. When I opened the door to let Dorothy in, everything changed. My family could no longer pretend this was a normal reconciliation visit. They had to show their real faces to someone who would judge their behavior by normal standards of human decency. And what Dorothy saw shocked even me with its cruelty. Dorothy's arrival transformed the entire dynamic in my living room. Suddenly, my family couldn't maintain their facade of concerned relatives wanting to reconcile. They were forced to reveal their true nature in front of someone who knew me as a successful, kind, independent woman, not the family disappointment they had convinced themselves I was. "Hello, Mrs. Patterson," Dorothy said politely as she entered, then stopped short when she saw Tyler rifling through papers on my desk and Jessica rearranging items in my kitchen like she already lived there. "Who's this?" Tyler demanded, his voice instantly aggressive when faced with an unexpected witness to their behavior. "Dorothy Patterson, no relation to your family." Dorothy replied coolly, taking in the scene with the sharp eyes of someone who had raised 4 children and knew manipulation when she saw it. "I'm Brianne's business partner and friend." Jessica emerged from my kitchen holding one of my coffee mugs like she belonged there. "We're Brianne's family. This is private family business. Family business that involves going through her personal belongings without permission," Dorothy observed, noting Tyler's position at my desk and the scattered papers around him. "We're just trying to understand Brianne's financial situation," Robert said, with his practiced, reasonable tone. "As her family, we need to know if she can afford to help us during our time of need." Dorothy's expression grew ice cold. "Brianne doesn't owe you financial information. She doesn't owe you anything from what I understand about how you treated her when she was struggling." "You don't know the whole story," Sharon snapped, dropping her maternal concern act entirely. "Brianne was always dramatic, always playing the victim when things didn't go her way." "The victim," Dorothy repeated slowly. "You mean when she was homeless and you refused to let her sleep on your couch?" Tyler stepped toward Dorothy aggressively. "This is none of your business, lady. This is family business." "Don't you dare threaten me in Brianne's house," Dorothy said firmly, not backing down an inch, despite being 73 years old, facing a man 50 years younger. That's when Robert made the mistake that changed everything. He put his hands on Dorothy's shoulders and tried to physically move her toward the door. "I think you should leave now," he said, applying pressure to guide her out of my living room. Dorothy stumbled slightly, catching herself against my coffee table. "Take your hands off me immediately." Tyler grinned, energized by his father's aggression. "Yeah, this is our family meeting. Time for you to go. Nobody is going anywhere, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I pulled out my phone, which had been recording everything since Dorothy arrived. Except all of you. Tyler's face went white when he realized I had been documenting their behavior. You can't record us without permission. That's illegal. Actually, in this state, single-party consent laws mean I can record any conversation I'm part of in my own home. I replied, calmly hitting the stop button and immediately uploading the file to my cloud storage. But this recording is just the most recent evidence. I walked to my home office and returned with a thick manila folder that I had hoped never to use. Tyler, do you remember calling my employers to tell them I was a drug addict and thief? I have all the documentation. Phone records witness statements from Carlos at the diner, Mrs. Chen, from dog walking Jennifer, from Megamart. Every employer you sabotaged, every lie you told, every client you cost me. Tyler's confident smirk faltered as I opened the folder and showed pages of documented evidence. I have medical records proving I was genuinely sick when you refused to help me. Bank statements showing I spent my savings caring for Helen while you partied with her inheritance money. Photos of the slashed tire with your threatening note. Sharon tried to interrupt. Brianne, this is ancient history. We're here to move forward as a family. You're here to steal my house, I said directly. Tyler, you researched adverse possession laws. You thought if you could establish residency here for 30 days, you could claim partial ownership. I found your internet search history on the library computer you used. Jessica's face crumpled as she realized how thoroughly I had documented their plan. We just need help. I'm pregnant and we have nowhere else to go. You have somewhere to go, I replied without sympathy. You have Robert and Sharon's basement where you were living before you decided my house looked more appealing. You have Tyler's construction income when he's not gambling it away. You have Jessica's family, who you haven't asked for help because you've spent years telling them what a successful provider Tyler is. Robert drew himself up with fading authority. Brianne, we are your parents. You will show us respect and consideration. I will show you exactly the respect and consideration you showed me when I was sleeping in a truck behind a laundromat because you were too embarrassed to let me sleep on your couch. I picked up my landline phone and dialed 911, maintaining eye contact with Tyler as it rang. I'd like to report a trespassing situation at my home, I said calmly to the dispatcher. 4 people have entered my house, uninvited, refused to leave when asked, gone through my personal belongings, and physically assaulted my elderly friend. They're claiming family relationship gives them the right to take over my property. Tyler panicked. Hang up that phone. You can't call the police on your own family. Watch me, I replied, continuing to speak with the dispatcher while Tyler raged. When the police arrived 8 minutes later, they found a scene that required no investigation to understand. Dorothy sat on my couch with a bruised shoulder visibly shaken from Robert's physical aggression. Tyler was stuffing my electronics into a garbage bag, claiming they were family property anyway. Jessica was in my bedroom measuring the space for baby furniture. Sharon was going through my kitchen cabinets, removing items she declared Tyler and Jessica would need. Officer Martinez listened to my recording, examined my documentation, and spoke briefly with Dorothy about what she had witnessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler was arrested for assault on Dorothy and attempted theft of my property. Robert and Sharon were issued restraining orders requiring them to stay at least 500 feet from my home and business. Jessica, as the only one who hadn't committed a clear crime, was allowed to leave with her in-laws, but not before Officer Martinez explained that any future attempt to claim my property would result in serious legal consequences. My advice, Officer Martinez told Jessica kindly but firmly, is to find somewhere else to live and someone else to depend on. Your husband and his parents have just destroyed any goodwill they might have had with your sister-in-law." As the police car pulled away with Tyler in handcuffs, I stood on my front porch with Dorothy, both of us watching my family drive away in defeat and humiliation. "How do you feel?" Dorothy asked gently, putting her uninjured arm around my shoulders. "Free," I said, and meant it completely. The legal aftermath unfolded over several months. Tyler pled guilty to assault and attempted theft, receiving court-mandated gambling addiction treatment and 100 hours of community service. Robert and Sharon were forced to sell their house to pay legal fees, and Tyler's debts moving to a small apartment across town where they blamed everyone except themselves for their financial problems. Jessica divorced Tyler 6 weeks before giving birth to a healthy daughter. She moved back to her parents' home in another state and sent me a card that simply read, "Thank you for showing me who he really is. I'm sorry I was part of hurting you." The local newspaper picked up the story as a human interest piece about overcoming homelessness and building a successful business. The article, headlined, "From Truck to Triumph, Local Woman's Journey to Success," brought even more clients to Wildflower Designs and inspired other women to share their stories of family estrangement and personal resilience. 6 months after the confrontation, I established the Helen Patterson Memorial Scholarship Fund for students aging out of foster care, providing not just tuition assistance, but also mentorship and emotional support for young people building lives without family safety nets. The scholarship focused on practical skills training and small business development, helping recipients become financially independent while developing their creative talents. I also started a monthly support group for people dealing with estrangement from toxic families. We met at the community center, where I had designed my first wedding arrangements, creating a space where people could share their experiences without judgment and build chosen families based on mutual respect and genuine care. Dorothy became my closest friend and surrogate mother, the family member I had always needed, but never had. On holidays, instead of sitting alone or wondering if I should attempt contact with relatives who had never valued me, I hosted dinner parties for other people who had built chosen families from friendships that felt deeper and more authentic than blood relationships. My business grew beyond wedding planning into full event design and community beautification projects. I contracted with the city to design seasonal flower displays for downtown, bringing color and beauty to spaces where everyone could enjoy them. Helen would have loved knowing that her granddaughter had found a way to share the gift of flowers with an entire community. The house that my family had tried to steal became the foundation for a life richer and more fulfilling than anything I had imagined during those dark months of sleeping in a truck. I filled it with friends who appreciated my hospitality, employees who needed encouragement as they built their own dreams, and foster children who needed temporary homes with adults who understood what it meant to be abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. Every room held memories of kindness given and received. The kitchen, where Jessica had presumed to rearrange my belongings, became the heart of holiday celebrations for people who had found family in friendship. The living room, where Tyler had tried to claim my electronics, hosted book clubs, business meetings, and quiet conversations with young women, learning to believe they deserved better than the families who had discarded them. 3 years after that terrible morning when my family showed up with suitcases and entitlement, I hosted a garden party to celebrate Wildflower Designs being named Small Business of the Year by the State Commerce Department. 50 people filled my backyard, eating food prepared in my kitchen, admiring flower arrangements created with skills Helen had taught me decades earlier. Dorothy raised a toast as the sun set over my garden. To Brianne, who learned that the most beautiful flowers often grow in the soil that seems least fertile. Thank you for showing all of us that family isn't about blood. It's about people who water your roots instead of trying to cut them. As I looked around at the faces of people who had supported me, encouraged me, and celebrated my success, without expecting anything in return, I understood something profound about love and worthiness that I had never grasped during my childhood of seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it. The family who had laughed while I lived in a truck, who had tried to steal the house I built with my own strength and creativity, who had spent years trying to convince me I was worth nothing. They were the ones who had lost everything of value. I had gained everything that actually mattered: work that honored Helen's memory, while serving my community friendships based on mutual respect and genuine affection, and most importantly, the unshakable knowledge that I deserved love's success and happiness, not because of what I could provide to others, but simply because I existed. Standing in my garden surrounded by chosen family, successful in business, secure in my own home, I finally understood what Helen had been trying to teach me all those years ago in her flower shop. Sometimes, the most beautiful growth comes after the deepest pruning and the strongest roots develop when they have to reach through rocky soil to find nourishment. I had not just survived my family's cruelty. I had thrived in spite of it, and in doing so, I had created something they could never touch or take away: a life built on my own terms, filled with people who valued me for exactly who I was. Call to action. Have you ever had to choose between toxic family relationships and your own well-being? Sometimes the hardest decision is also the most necessary one for creating the life you truly deserve. Share your thoughts in the comments below about building chosen family and finding strength during difficult times. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support for anyone who's had to rebuild their life from nothing. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about overcoming adversity and finding your inner strength when the people closest to you become obstacles instead of support. Please share this story with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to create a beautiful life, even after losing everything you thought mattered. Sometimes our greatest victories come from the ashes of our deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting others who are fighting their own battles with family dysfunction and financial struggle. May you always remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it, and that the best families are often the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born into.